If you did the 2024 New South Wales Selective Exam and your writing looks like what I'm going to show you today, chances are you'll do pretty well. Let's get into it. The New South Wales Selective Exam was on the 9th of May 2024, and there were 18,544 students in Year 6 who did the exam this year, for about 4,200 selective high school positions. A big component of the exam was writing, and this was a newspaper report. This is the same text type that was given 3 years ago, with the older one titled Chaos on the Beach. There were definitely some similarities to the previous one that was given a few years ago, but there were still some clear differences that students needed to recognize if they wanted to do well in this year's writing response. After the exam on Thursday, as well as Friday on the 10th of May, I spent many hours speaking to different students and parents that we taught at Bing's Academy. This was useful for students and parents to have a much clearer idea on how they went, and they might adjust their school choices accordingly. Although during this process, not only did it help them understand how they did, but also gave me a good idea on what the writing question was like and what students needed to do in it. What I'm going to go through today is breaking down the question on what the students need to be aware of when responding to it. And let it be clear, it is not going to be the exact question in the real test, but it's a recreation based on student feedback, my own experience in teaching the selective high school exam for 10 years now, and understanding the new selective school format created by Cambridge Assessment. The title is Animals on the Loose. We know this is critical as it will need to be incorporated within the actual writing piece. It gives us information that animals have already potentially escaped and that it's not planned, and also sets the tone of our response. Students need to recognize that we're likely already in a moment of crisis within our newspaper report, or that quick action is taking place. It has connotations of urgency and unexpectedness that the animals are already on the loose. For a newspaper report, we know that a catchy headline is crucial. Students are given the option to either use Animals on the Loose, which is directly from the title in the question, or they can make another title that is similar to it, but unique to the actual response, such as Gorillas Go Bananas in Sydney. Next is the contextual information, which is the part right below the heading. The first sentence is something along the lines of, there have been sightings of animals that have escaped onto the main road and is heading towards town. Students need to know the power of plurals. We know there is more than one sighting, so there's likely that this has actually already occurred. If there was only one sighting, it reminds me of like a myth or an allegation that may or may not have been actually true, such as a folklore creature like Bigfoot. This also shows that it's likely going to be sightings from different people. We know that it is animals with an S, so if you only mention one animal, it is not going to be correct. There's also a minimum of 2 because it's plural. It does not necessarily mean that you have to have them from the same species. It can be a tiger and a lion, or more than just one tiger, for instance. There is significance of the main road, so the escape of the animals is happening where there could be a higher amount of traffic. If it wasn't a main road, they wouldn't have mentioned it was a main road. There is a reason why they don't mention a normal road or a side road where there may or may not be as many people around, which is an important element that has to be integrated in your response. This could be potential traffic disruptions, safety hazards for both the animal and residents, and the high visibility of the incident. We know that animals have escaped, so this was not according to plan. Most students that I spoke to talked about a zoo or a farm, as these are locations where a variety of animals are typically seen and have the potential of escaping from. One important point is to make sure that the animals that I mentioned make sense for the location. If you mention a lion, they wouldn't really be found in a farm, or vice versa. If you mention it is a zoo where they escaped from, you'll not likely find a duck or a chicken there. We also know the direction of where the animals are going to. It is towards town. This means the animals are going to a populated area and can raise some concerns about public safety and even some possible interactions that animals can have with the people in the town. They don't specify a town name. The students need to make the clear assumption and mention it themselves. If you only say town, you're not painting a clear enough image in your response. Instead, make up an area or just mention a town you're familiar with, such as Parramatta, Chatswood, or Homebush. The next sentence in the contextual information was, local people have reacted to the animals on the loose and the effect it had. This just reinforces that local residents, business owners, officials, or even the police have their own unique reactions and opinions to the incident. Depending on the scale of the animals and the types of animals escaping, this could involve different people. There is no right or wrong person to include here as long as it makes sense to the broader response. Quotes and paraphrased information needs to be included in the body paragraphs, which is a key element in a newspaper report. This is also the same for the previous selective high school exam in the writing component, which was chaos on the beach 3 years ago. Ideally, the opinions from the local people have a varied range of emotions and perspectives. If police had to come to protect citizens from multiple guerrillas that were on the loose, they're likely going to be more willing to use violence if it's required. Whereas if a local vet has come to the situation, they would more likely to be concerned about the guerrillas' health and welfare. The second half of the sentence was regarding the impact and effects of the animals. This is just reinforcing the previous sentence and makes it even clearer that students needed to talk about the consequences. As with all New South Wales selective writing responses, it will have a bolded line that will clearly tell us what is the text type, in case students are confused. In this line, it was something along the lines of, write a newspaper report about this incident for the local paper. This tells us the text type being a newspaper report. Students need to already know the conventions of a newspaper report, otherwise they run the risk of not doing as well compared to students who know it. In addition, it has a local paper. For this response, students need to write down a name of a paper in which it was published in. If the zoo is called Dubbo Zoo, and that's where the animals escape from, then the paper could be called Dubbo News. Not much to talk about here besides the fact that every little detail within the New South Wales selective writing question is crucial for students to be aware of. It may not be a big significance, but for the students that are pushing for a fully selective high score, every little bit counts in order for you to perform better than other students. The question then suggests that the report could include some details from dot points. If you have followed this channel, although they say you could use it, you essentially have to use them. In my opinion, you ideally have to use these points, but you're also able to include additional or slightly different points in the response if applicable and if appropriate. The first dot point was to explain what the animals were and where they came from. This is quite clear where the student needs to be specific of the animals that escaped, whether they are common like horses or cows to more exotic animals such as lions or elephants that may be from a zoo. The choice of animal affects the perceived danger and interest in the newspaper report. The origin of the animal needs to be mentioned. The source could impact the newspaper report around responsibility and the measures being taken to prevent future incidences, as well as the reactions from people. Did it come from a zoo, a farm, a circus, or even a wildlife reserve? If it came from a zoo or a circus, there might be some concerns about animal welfare and whether animals should be restricted rather than being in the natural habitat. It might go through regulatory compliance with the police stepping in or the enclosure security in general. If it was a farm, there might be points in the newspaper report about the fencing or the lack of fencing and local wildlife interactions. The second dot point was describe the impact that had on the area. This is quite broad, so it allows for creativity from the student. This could be from traffic disruptions, such as the animals being near the main road. It could mean roads were closed or there were long traffic jams heading into town. It could also have a business impact, making some shops closed. Alternatively, perhaps more people wanted to visit the area because of the escaped animals, and that led to increased business from cafes or restaurants. Did we need a wildlife expert or the local police to step in? We know that for local people, they may face delays and changes to their routine as well. Maybe students can't go to school or adults can't get to work. There is no right or wrong impact to mention here, but just make sure it's specific to the animals who are on the loose in the area you're talking about. If it's not specific to it or it doesn't make logical sense, then it will be more difficult for you to get extra marks. The third and last thought point was along the lines of including comments from local people or residents. This would have to be fabricated but believable quotes from a variety of perspectives: local residents, business owners, local officials, representatives from where the animals escaped from, like the farm owner, etc., can be included. The list just goes on and on. Each perspective should offer a slightly different angle on the incident. Otherwise, you run the risk of not being specific enough in your response. But I listed off 6 or 7 different people you could have included quotes and opinions from. You should not use that many people. Otherwise, you're going to lack a lot of detail. Choose the right people in your response in order to maximize the marks. The types of comments would differ depending on the person. Residents may express concern or fear or even excitement. Business owners could be frustrated if they're forced to close their store, whereas local officials have to reassure the public that clear steps have been done to ensure this situation does not happen again. Remember that for a newspaper report, it cannot just be quotes and quotes and quotes. If you only include back-to-back quotes and without much analysis or paraphrasing, it will be a very weak response. Now we know the complete breakdown of what the question is talking about and wants students to write about. There are some important tips to really keep in mind if you're really looking to get into these fully selective high schools. The first is the tone. Students at Bing's Academy knows the nature of a newspaper report is one where it is largely objective. The report has to be neutral and focused on presenting factual information. Direct quotes need to be used to help add authenticity to your response and to make it more believable. If you write about an alien who escaped, it is going to be quite far-fetched and it's not going to have or yield the type of response because it's going to be too left field or very different. Clear and concise language to make the writing straightforward is crucial. Avoid the overly complex language or sentence structures if you're not confident with it. We know vocabulary, spelling, and grammar are important areas that contribute to the overall mark, so keep this in mind very carefully. You do not need to just use advanced words and technical jargon just for the sake of it. Keep with your own words and just make sure that your response fits the text type first. For instance, if elephants escape, you could talk about the tusks and the mammoth-sized legs it has rather than calling it big. It's going to be a much better description and characterization of the elephants, and your vocabulary will contribute to a higher mark as well. Audience awareness is crucial, and the overall purpose is to inform in this response. If your response does not answer the question properly and inform the audience about what you're trying to let them know about, you will not be able to get more than 50% in your writing. When and if they release the actual writing response later on, there will be some differences. I don't want you to complain or point them out in the video and say, hey, I actually remember this word was slightly different to the one that you pointed out, John. It's inevitable. There will be some slight differences, but the essence of this will largely be the same as what was given on May the 9th in the 2024 writing exam for the selective test. Rather, the biggest benefit and value of this whole video is that we can learn from it. It's never going to be the exact same, but don't point out the little specifics here and try to look at the bigger picture. Instead of waiting months or potentially not having released at all, students can now practice from this year's 2024 writing selective paper if they intend on doing it in 2025 and onwards. In addition, for the students who did it this year, they may be able to remember if their response aligned to what I talked about, and they can have a better understanding on how they may have performed, and perhaps they could also change some of their school options. What we do in our one-on-one classes at Bing's Academy is quite simple. We go through a lot of this, but in much deeper detail. But the majority of students who are with us ultimately felt like it was a pretty straightforward question, especially as they've already given this newspaper report before in a previous year's selective exam. If you enjoyed this video, let me know. If you disagree or you had some extra points to contribute, or if you talked about an animal that I didn't discuss today, then write it down in the comments below. More than happy to do so. Like this video if you haven't already. It allows more students to also benefit, and we don't get paid for this, right? So it literally helps more students like yourself. Let me know if you have any other questions. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.